One more time. All right. We got connected to Wi-Fi. And here we are again. Natalie from Creative Makers, Ray Turner. Yay.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you want to get more in?
I'm just going to launch.
That's
okay. We're good.
Okay.
I'm just going to launch into my first question, and then we're just going to go from there.
Great.
Okay. So tell me how creativity came to you when you were a kid. How did you express it?
Boy, that's a good question. Probably it was just like in the academia, whatever the school was doing, we dabbled in this or that, but I didn't really start or know I could draw or wanted to draw or anything until I was junior in college. And that's
really
when
that
I
late?
Yeah.
Wow.
I took a beginning drawing class, and an art instructor took me under his wing. It was the first 4 years of college at Eastern Oregon State College in Oregon. And then so he took me under his wing and said, I don't know how much longer you're planning on playing football, but you should really consider a career in art. And then he showed me Art Center College Design's catalog and blew me away. And then the next thing I know, I applied and made enough money to pay for a couple of semesters of tuition. And then one thing after another, and then they offered me a teaching position when I graduated. And
wait a minute, you're moving way too fast. All right, wait a minute. Okay, so let me get this straight. So you didn't even know that you could draw until much later, until you were in late teens, early 20s?
I was a junior in college when I took the beginning drawing class, and then and then this guy took me under his wing. And I changed from business to art my senior year because this guy was just a great mentor, and he was very enthusiastic about my doing what I was doing. I hated accounting. I was a business major, and I thought, oh man, I can't take another class in business. And then I loved the art part of things, and so one thing I just took everything. Hey, Topper.
There's a dog in here. It's okay. There's nothing good in that bag.
He's so funny.
The dog's got his face in my camera bag stuff, and it's hilarious.
Anyway, he was a huge inspiration and very instrumental. And so I wound up taking nothing but art classes my senior year, changed my major to art. He showed me that catalog from Art Center.
And then when you went so you actually attended Art Center? Did you get a master's from there?
No, it was just a regular undergraduate. At the time, there were the average age was actually 24. The average age of the students at Art Center when I went. Mm-hmm. And anyway, it tended to be that people would come after having an undergraduate degree, would then go attend Art Center. That was about, I'd say 85 to 90% of the students, maybe even higher than that at the time. Now it's much younger, but.
We have an audience that's like all over the country, and so I've interviewed many people that have been affiliated with Art Center or taught at Art Center, and so I'm just going to say it again. Art Center is a college in Pasadena that specializes in art and design. They have many people that come out of that class with incredible fine art, and then they also do like car design. I mean, just all kinds of very technical sort of thing. It's a pretty prestigious school.
And one of the boasts at one point, I don't know if this is still true, I'm pretty sure it is. It was about 10 years ago that I heard this, is that there's not a car on the road that is not influenced by Art Center College of Design. No matter what car it is, from the top of the line, whatever, to the economy cars. So they have their fingers in it.
Yeah, it's pretty influential.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Anyway, so then my junior year at Art Center, what I called junior, 7th semester, an art instructor there suggested that I might teach, and so she had me meet with the vice president at the time, and so one thing led to another. 3 weeks after I graduated, I was teaching, and it was really one of the best things that ever happened to me, and that as far as being an artist, because like anything, if you try to teach something, you learn a lot more. Probably, sorry to admit it, but I learned a lot more, I'm sure, than the students did. But it was just a great experience, and I taught there for about 12 years.
I think that's very true. On top of that, you have to articulate what you're doing. Exactly. It really makes you think about how to get it down and get it across. Right. So So at that point, coming out, going, I mean, was that your first job? I mean, were you selling work?
Oh my gosh, I had so many jobs. My dad gave me $100 handshake, I call it. He gave me $100 check. I was almost embarrassed to cash, and when I was 17, went off to college, and then that was it. So I had so many jobs I can't number them. But Art Center, of course, once I was teaching, and then I was also making art full time. So full time being, a 40 to 60 hour a week.
Yeah. So the work that you were making coming out of school, I mean, at that point, were people already taking notice and wanting to buy your work? Were you showing in galleries? I mean, what was the transition?
So that's a great question. The Ian was such a terrific instructor in that regard. He always said, let this line your pocket, not your ego. And so he started both a very good friend of mine who actually wound up being going to Art Center after me, or with me. We wound up being roommates after he graduated from Eastern Oregon. And we started selling watercolors at the time for the big number was $25, and the cheapest one I think was either $5 or $15 or something, And then the big money was a commission. I did a portrait, and it was really my first portrait of I can't remember her name right now, but I love her music too. She was married to the governor.
Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah, Linda Ronstadt. And then I did one of Jackson Browne, and I made a whopping $170, $85 a piece on those. So that kind of gave me the idea that, gosh, maybe there's a chance that I can do something with this. And then, so I wasn't bashful about the marketing part of things, which I think really helps.
Yeah.
And you have to have, I believe you have to have several components that work for you when you're going to make it as an artist. And the humility part of it is probably quintessential. You have to just keep slugging it out and just keep showing up, because it can be pretty grueling sometimes. Just looking at your own work and thinking, gosh, how do I measure up and all that sort of stuff. I think that's the best place to be always. The other thing is you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to let this piece go. I'm willing to be humble enough to say, yeah, I'd like to be paid for it. And then, one thing leads to another, and you get more and more comfortable with that sort of thing. And then eventually what probably happens, or at least happened with me, is as much as I'm making a living as an artist now, since I took a leave of absence. I said I'd come back when I was 60, thinking 60 was, light years away, and turns out it's not. Anyway, so I took that leave of absence. I'm still on the leave of absence from Art Center, and that was because I wanted to paint full time, and that was in '89.
That was in '89 that you
98, and I'm sorry, 98.
Oh, okay.
98.
Still,
sorry.
that was in '98 that you
98.
took your leave of absence?
Right,
Oh my gosh,
right.
okay.
And I did that. One of my best friends, my best friend at the time was Richard Bunkall, and he had ALS and was dying. And anyway, one thing after another, I wound up really helping him and helping Sally. And then I wound up marrying Sally. And the kids are, George was my godson, and the twins, of course, I was there. I mean, I was there since they were tiny, since they were baby. I was there when they were born.
This is like
a
whole nother
That's
tangent.
a whole nother story.
A whole nother tangent. I'd love to investigate, but I'm going to let that go for right now.
Good.
But I love these sorts of things that happen, because love is so messy.
Oh, it is so
awesome.
great, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So when you were at Art Center, what were you predominantly teaching? Was it just drawing?
I started with the drawing class, and it was called Drawing Concepts. What I did at the time was I thought, the students a lot of times come out of Art Center and their portfolios look like any menagerie of different things from different students, teachers, whatever the class assignments would be reflective in their work. And my thinking was that I wanted to help them have more of a sense of everything kind of working in their portfolio to give their voice, basically, to kind of discover their own personal direction.
So the work was more cohesive and more reflective of who they were,
yes,
as artists?
Right, and that the class, that they would work the class instead of the class working them, basically. And so how could they do that more with the way that they approached whatever the assignment was? And so because of that, the work that they did was just very much theirs. They made up whatever it is they wanted to do, and I would just give them direction with the materials. And so that's how it started. And then I started doing a painting class as well, and wound up painting and drawing, and taught night school, or even the evening class. The evening class was actually really great because they were all adults and they had already had careers and things. That was really something.
There's a member of our group and a friend of mine, Bonnie Lambert, who took a class with you and always talks highly of it and stuff. Yeah, she was excited that we were going to do this. I'm sure that she might be even lip
Love
saying.
Bonnie.
Yeah, there's people saying hello, 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 hello. So talk to me about your work and about your creative process and what inspires you. Because you have a couple of, from what I can see, you have more than a couple, but you have like some things that you really hone in on, like portraiture. And I saw a landscape show that you did just recently, and I see that there's a big push here towards abstracts. So tell me about like what it is that's inspiring this.
So for a long time, I really fought the idea, like maybe I was somewhat not schizophrenic, not to make light of schizophrenia, but kind of just all over the globe, that I couldn't zero in on anything, have a laser beam. And I felt like it was kind of an Achilles or a weakness. And at one point, there was an art historian, critic guy that I really love. His name is Peter Frank, and he had actually done a review on a body of work that I did about 2 or 3 years out of Art Center, and it was all abstract work. It was called Compendium. It was the first Compendium exhibit. And he gave me Pick of the Week, or whatever it was called at the time, the LA Weekly, and we became somewhat acquainted, and then over the years became more friendly. And he was here in the studio about, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago when I first started Population. And he said, Ray, you've got about 7 different directions going here. And I thought, oh boy, here it comes. Like, get focused, That's what I thought he was going to say. But he said, and it's all very focused. And, I think you're just keep doing what you're doing. And you probably feel like you have too much work in the studio. There's a ton of work here and stuff. He goes, it's just make the work. Don't even look back. And so since then, I've been doing that. And not really, I haven't had that many exhibits in the meanwhile. I've been fortunate enough to keep enough collectors, and I have a couple of very significant collectors, one in particular that's in Boston. His name is Jeff Markley, and the Markley collection is quite significant. And so I've done about 150 of his employees' portraits. He's bought another 150 plus probably work of abstract. Everything that I've done, he's bought something from it. And so anyway,
that's nice to have such a nice supporter.
Got to have something like that.
Yeah.
It's essential. Absolutely. You have to have some support, whether it's just a cheerleader who supports you from just an emotional standpoint, or somebody that actually can help keep the lights on.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is going to make a lot of members of this group feel relieved, because this group is all about not picking. Artists that express themselves in so many different ways.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, it's creative makers, artists who can't stick to one medium.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the medium can be, even just the subject matter.
Okay, that's great.
And so, there's always many a talk about ADHD.
Oh, yeah.
and about, I don't understand how my brain works, and, why can I do this and this and this and not this? Mm-hmm. So it's just really interesting. Yeah. I'm sure this is bringing big relief to people that are, paying attention and thinking that they're crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we are actually. To be an artist, you have to be.
You have to think outside the box for sure.
Yeah, I like the word crazy. I don't have any qualms with that word. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing then since. Peter was here about 2010, I think, doing an interview with me, and from that time until now, I really feel like those words have resonated and been a real sort of standard for me to hold on to. And there have been plenty of times where I'm like, oh, what in the heck am I doing? I have more work now than, I should have. And, what am I going to do with it? Or what's my family have? Once you get to, now I'm 64. So once you get into your 60s, you start thinking a little bit more about, hey, you don't have that much time left. So, don't want it all going into a dumpster, So.
Oh my God. That was not what I was expecting right now.
Well, the reality is that there's a ton of art out there, and there's a ton of artists out there. Yeah. And, your ability to make whatever it is you're making and really put your heart into it, the real value in doing that is that and that alone. And so if you do that, I think that you've made a successful body of work, whether or not it ever has a success maybe in the world, in the art community or whatever, it's still there, and you've still done it, and you've still had that remarkable period of time that you were able to create and follow your dreams. And I think those things are really the most vital part. I had a friend who said that he's a godly guy, and he said, God sees every one of those pieces in the drawer, in the back room, or whatever. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah, I know. I mean, to remember that it's seen.
Yeah.
In a big scope.
Yes. Yes.
Can you talk about? I think there's lots of people that do work that don't think about this, but I think it happens with everyone, and about what you're trying to get out of yourself when you're putting stuff on to paper or canvas or whatever. I don't know. Are you trying to paint something out in terms of emotional? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I think what I'm primarily interested in is how something is put together from a conceptual standpoint, what drives whatever it is that you're doing, and the different sort of themes that I work in. There's a certain theme within that that sort of informs the work. But then,
well, let's take it for instance. Like I'm looking that we've got a couple of landscapes behind us. Let's just delve into the landscape.
So with the landscape, there's basically, I think I start the landscapes. They're all done out of my head now. I don't look at any imagery to kind of be inspired by. I have a basic knowledge of figure-ground relationships and the foreground, middle ground, background sort of stuff. And I've really looked at them more abstractly, just as bands of shapes first, and then whatever nuances happen within my moving paint around. Because what I really care about is how a painting is put together. Probably that's maybe the most important thing to me, because if it's not put together well, if the painting isn't well painted, which means that painting has this quality that you just go, gosh, that's so fun to look at. It's a good painting. It doesn't matter what the image is so much to me. Francis Bacon is one of my favorite painters. His imagery is not what inspires me at all. How he puts those paintings together, or put those paintings together, I should say, unfortunately he's gone. Man, I've never been more inspired by a painter than Francis Bacon. Seeing his work, I saw his retrospective in 4 different places when it was traveling several years ago. And I'm absolutely blown away by the way that the painting's put together, the nuances from the surface all the way up to the, or back, I should say, to the canvas or velvet or whatever it was he was painting on. So those things are what I really care about and putting the painting together. And so that it happens to be a landscape, or there's some form in the landscape or whatever. That part just kind of happens intuitively. And I also kind of feel like I try to get out of the way and just let the painting go where it goes, instead of trying to direct it into some image or some feeling or something. I feel like the feeling's going to come out anyway. I'm going to get the feeling. The feeling is kind of a natural thing that happens with most of us, if not all of us. But
it's unavoidable.
Yeah, it's unavoidable. And once I get, that's the other thing is, and I'm sure that all of you feel the same way, is that once you get going, once the paint, I hate squeezing paint out. That's a little side note. I had an assistant at one point, and they would squeeze out my paint for me because I don't know what it is. It just feels like a little detail thing that I don't enjoy. Once I'm doing it, once I've done that though, and I pick up a brush, I'm in. I don't know. It's blissful. It's blissful.
Transported.
I'm transported, and then it's great until I leave the studio and come back the next morning sometimes. But sometimes I come back and I'm really enthused and really happy with what I did, and then sometimes it's just like, okay, that didn't work. I got to slug it out some more. So some of these paintings are heavy because there's so much paint on them. And they're years old. I
see a question. Georgia says, can he explain what he means by putting the painting together?
Yeah, so I will sometimes just squeeze paint onto the canvas or glass or whatever surface I'm painting on. I'll just start by just putting paint on. Not so much, it's somewhat randomly, but after a while there's, a certain rhythm to it. And so I'll wind up maybe even taking cans of paint and just putting loads and loads of paint on, because I know that what I want to do that particular day is to move heavy amounts of paint around. And I have different moods that I come in with, and for whatever reason, sometimes it's very thin. I'll maybe work with watercolor, thin in the way that the paint's applied. Same thing with the oil paintings. Sometimes I'll have 5 or 6 paintings that I'll work on all at the same time, and they're all bone dry, but I'll be glazing them. And so applying the paint might be with a rag or with a big house painting brush, a big 4-inch brush. And so that's what I mean about applying the paint, how the paint's put down. And everything that I do, every painting that I start and every painting that I complete, I'm trying, the biggest attempt for me is I want to put the paint down differently each time. And so if you were looking at the portraits, for instance, it's not really so much a technique or a method that you go, oh, that's how he paints a head. In a sense, it is how I paint the head because it's my painting, but in the mark making of it, I try to make a lot of different kinds of moves or a lot of different kinds of shapes or surfaces. Does that answer it?
I would think so. Yeah. I'm sure if Georgia has more questions, she's going to.
Thanks, Georgia.
Just out of curiosity, I'm just going to see. Oh, there's some other stuff. Okay. Oh, people just saying hallelujah that I'm on. I'm working on a project while watching and listening. My hands have to stay busy. Okay, this is just people telling us what they're doing. Doing one type of thing over and over again is boring. They're agreeing to you being like all over the place. Okay. All right. That's everybody else is just hello. Okay. So on the landscapes, were you working predominantly in oils?
Yes. I don't think, as a matter of fact, I don't think I've done anything maybe in the monotypes. There were a few times when I was doing the monotypes. I worked with 2 different master printers, one from, what's the name of the press? The Gemini press. And then the other one was a guy that worked as an apprentice with, and he was just a kid sweeping up the floors at the time. He had no idea who Bacon, Moreau, Matisse, all these guys were in the studio when he was a young lad. So anyway, I really like working with that guy. I've done probably 300 or 400 monotypes with him. And so, what was I know I forgot what I was talking about, but.
I was asking about oils and whether the landscapes were oils.
Yeah, and so I have done a few monotypes that were landscapes, and that's about it. Other than that, I pretty much am doing only oil paintings with the landscapes. With the watercolors, I'm doing abstract.
You want to go grab a couple of
your
portal things?
Okay.
He was just showing me some watercolors that he was working on, some abstract work, whatever you like. I don't know, 2, 3. You should see this studio, you guys. It's sick, so sickly good.
This is kind of spontaneous, but
I like spontaneity.
okay. Show you the ugly ones too.
Yeah, show me the ugly ones. All right, that's enough.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So
now, here, I can hold them up while you talk about them.
Well, these are just the small ones.
So here, talk about the whole concept of portals.
So the portals are this idea. I didn't know anything about portals, but I think it's the Marvel probably was the one that turned me on mostly to the idea of portals. I didn't really know at the time I was painting portals, and
so science fiction sort of thing.
Yeah, I was right, they're science fiction,
and if I'm holding these upside
down,
no,
it doesn't matter which way you hold them. Really, it's just about the paint.
Out of curiosity.
That's actually how it goes.
Oh, there you
go. Yeah. Anyways,
I'm going to get a little closer so that you guys can see line quality and just color melding.
Yeah, and so that's what I was interested in, is how watercolor at this point. I used to work with watercolor in a very controlled, picture making sort of thing when I first started painting. But now I'm really experimenting with how watercolor can be pushed in ways that is just breaking all the rules, basically.
I was going to say, because you don't hear about a lot of people doing abstracts with watercolors.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Maybe because of the layering. I don't know. This one, I love this one. I love this one.
Oh, thanks,
I love
Natalie.
This one.
This is a little more subtle, but yeah.
He's moving stuff out of the way that he's decided.
That's enough watercolor, but
isn't worthy.
No, not at all.
It's this one is subtle.
Yeah. So.
Puppy dog. No. Hold on. Get off the word. Get off. Here. Take that for a second.
I'll stand them up over here. So the idea with the watercolors or any part of the body of work that I've been doing is just what I think it was Gerhard Richter that wrote the book, A Practice of Painting or something like that, a painting practice or something. I really look at it that way. Like I come in and what I'm doing is exactly that, the practice of painting. And just put the time in. Put the time in. And I think Stephen King has been a big inspiration for me. I've only read maybe a handful of his books, but the fact that he writes what I call train stoppers, they're just big, thick, really well-written books from my perspective anyway. I think he's a terrific writer, and a big part of that is he's a terrific writer, but man, he just writes and writes and writes. And if you think about like J.D. Salinger or Harper Lee or whatever, wrote one novel basically.
Right.
And man, so I like that kind of work ethic, and I really think it pays in dividends. As I know some people maybe only they'll work when the inspiration happens, and I think if you wait for that, it's a real losing proposition. You have to just get in, start working, and something leads to something else. And I'm pretty sure that's how most of your people that
curiosity is leading them everywhere.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think there's lots of people though that do have that belief that, well, I'm not inspired. So since I'm not inspired, I'm not going to do anything.
Right.
You know, and that just doesn't get you anywhere.
Right.
Honestly.
No.
What is it? I mean, do you even remember what inspiration looks like when you're like, you know, if it hit you in the head, would you even recognize it?
That's very well said. Yeah. I think you get inspired from the actual activity. And so you have to start. You have to just get in and do something. And, you know, the nice thing about the viewers that you have, and what you'd said, I didn't know this until you mentioned it a little while ago, is that they tend to experiment on a lot of different things. And so there's always something you can do. There's always something you can try. And it doesn't necessarily have to be. Sometimes this leads me to another thought as far as how we qualify the quality of the work or what makes it good, is we kind of start off a lot of times as artists that if it looks like whatever it is that you were painting or wanting to make, if it looks like it, that's successful. At one point, and that's another, going back to how the paint is applied question, is what really matters to me and should matter to anyone at one point when they've practiced long enough is it well done? And what does that mean? And it's not well done just because it looks like whatever it is you're painting. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. You know, a bad representational painting is just going to be a bad representational painting, or a likeness or whatever. I had an instructor who used to say, yeah, you know, you could do a John Wayne painting, but 50 years from now, when people don't know who John Wayne is, it's just going to be a bad painting.
Right? Is it going to hold up?
Yeah. So I think that criteria of what makes a good painting, and then, in order to know that, I think you have to see a lot of good paintings and expose yourself to heroes. I think heroes are really important for us, and they tell a story that kind of leads you down a path that makes your work your work. Eventually, you might be derivative of those people, of numbers of what. And don't ever apologize for that, is what I would say. I've been, if anything, guilty of that in spades. But I think that everyone is, if they're really honest. We're all spinning off of someone else.
Yeah, how could you not be?
Exactly.
How could you not be?
Yeah.
Okay, more questions. Here, hold on. I saw something come up. Do you ever struggle with charging people you are close to? I find myself giving away a lot of my art projects.
I think give them away all you want to give them away.
Somebody's saying, I charge my relatives.
I think both are great. When someone loves your work enough and you feel like giving it to them and you can afford to give it to them, I say do that. I've sold a number of pieces now over the last many years, and so I'm not bashful about selling them. It is awkward in the actual transaction. Having a gallerist or a dealer do that part of it is part of the best part of it on some level. If you have somebody if you're really uncomfortable selling personally, I think that's the best way to go. I think it's actually probably ultimately better to have a middleman anyway. I think selling out of your studio in that is it's a little dicey on some level. And then at the same time, I've done some of that, and I don't feel bad about it or anything. I've actually been supported by galleries that, I let them know, and it's totally okay too. So the other thing that I think, and along that line, to answer that question, is having a set price point is really important, so that you know what you want for the piece, so that you know that for me, I raised my prices 10% from the time I had my first exhibit. I would raise it 10% every year if I sold well that year. And so since having started off at $15, top price $25 or $85, I guess, $85 that year, It's gone up more than that over the years, obviously, but I don't raise it now 10% because I feel like the price point is a good price point. So that's important. What I do is I add the numbers together of the dimensions of the piece. Say it's a 24 by 24, and then I multiply by a number that then lands on a number. Say it's 10,000. So a 24 by 24 is $10,000. I find out what that number is that I multiplied by and say, yeah, that I like getting $10,000 for my 24 by 24s. That feels right and comfortable, and that lines up with what the history has been. And then from that point, I can go, okay, 36 by 36 is multiplied by that same number. So it's 72 multiplied by, say, 200 or 300 or 800, whatever it is.
So that you have a mathematical scale that makes sense.
It always makes sense, yeah, and it's real easy. And you don't ever, you're like, oh, what am I going to charge for this? Like, well, you know that you charge a certain amount for your watercolors, a certain amount for your drawings,
I was just going to say that. How does it differ? I mean, because sometimes some pieces take longer than others through no fault of the client, and it just does. I mean, do you take does that take that out of the equation, that if it's a watercolor and it's this size and this is what I charge per square inch or whatever, it's just what it is, no matter how long it really takes?
So my criteria now is it has to be, to leave this place, it has to be as exceptional as I can make it, which a lot of times I wreck a lot of paintings, and there's a painting underneath the painting I wish I could get back. But that said, works on paper are more affordable. The canvases, they do take a lot longer, and it's just different. In oil painting, people don't tend to buy a lot of works on paper, but on the works on paper, what's nice about that, if someone can't afford a $50,000 canvas painted, but they can get in and get one of your pieces for, say, $2,500 for a watercolor. That makes them happy. So you want to be able to address, as far as a market goes, you want to be able to have someone on the ground level of what they can afford, and then someone that maybe could afford a much more expensive piece. And so that's kind of how I sort of price my stuff. The oil paintings have a definite number. The watercolors have a definite number. The monotypes, the abstracts are the same. It's how big they are. And even though some of these abstractions and some of these paintings I have in here have been around for, I've been working on them for up to 20 years. So I don't look at the 20 years as much as is it a good paint? Can I really justify charging what I charge for this painting? And it better be good enough. And a lot of times it matters that the person likes the piece, because it's going to be good enough as far as my standards go, because I just won't do it any other way.
No, that's great. All right, let's see. There's other things I saw come up here. I charge relatives, and my daughter says I don't charge enough to make work. George is asking, what do you think makes a good painting? And also somebody wants to talk about your portraiture process, which I also want to talk about. But let's go back to what makes a good painting.
I think what makes a good painting is, again, how it's constructed. That it has, first of all, you want to look at it when you look at it from a distance, it holds, as far as the shape goes, it holds itself somehow from a design standpoint. So when you look at it, it resonates well, and just kind of intuitively you go, gosh, I'm drawn to that. And then that draw pulls you closer and closer until you're examining the piece to the gnat's eyelash sort of look, where it has that redemptive quality. As you get up closer, it just keeps giving and giving and giving. From a surface standpoint, active, passive, large shapes, small shapes, calligraphic, graphic, all those kinds of things. Color, the nuance of the brush strokes, the flat shapes and the more textured, all of those things are all something that puts the composition together, and the paint quality and how that paint looks as a surface. And so it can be intoxicating to look at, and it holds you, won't let you go.
I think that was a great answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's talk about your portraiture process.
Okay.
I mean, your portraits to me are luscious.
Oh,
They move. I mean, you know, it's almost to me like it's like you dip your paintbrush and then you just go like this and it just happens. I know that it's not true.
Well, it's actually true. That is how it happens. The paintings, most of the portraits, I don't tend to spend. At this point, I'll let myself
Part
paint.
of me wants to like pull.
Okay.
Here. Can you come over here?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this.
Okay.
This one here. I'm going to move over here because this
right.
was pulled off the wall.
This is Mary.
This is Mary.
And so with Mary, she's this beautiful woman that she did a donation to charity. And so I needed to paint this of her. And so with her, I wanted it to have this luscious, beautiful, sort of flowing beauty of her hair and all that sort of stuff. I tend to like painting men better because, because men don't really care what they look like most of the time. You know what I mean? Where women, I'd say that you could photograph a woman 100 times and they might pick one of the photographs as being kind of satisfactory. Mary is not that person. Mary is very sophisticated and you know, kind of likes work and likes the work for the work's sake. But anyway, in putting the paint down, I tend to not spend more than 2 hours to maybe a long time would be 4 or 5 hours to paint a painting of the paintings on the glass now, because I want them to have that fresh look. And so if you see one stroke, it really is one stroke. It's not two. So there may be multiple strokes building up to whatever shape it is that I'm painting, but within that, those strokes are fresh. I'm not really scumbling over, blending, or it's one stroke, not two. And so if you see a stroke and composing or in the composition, it's maybe you look at it and you go, gosh, it looks like there's 1,000 strokes. There probably are 1,000 strokes, but it's one stroke of fresh paint.
I know there's that whole movement on the internet, can you do a painting in 15 strokes?
I haven't seen it.
Oh yeah, there are things that you can find that they're like, okay, can you do a little portrait of a piece of fruit in 9 strokes? And so it makes it for a very interesting thing when you start thinking about, why do I have to?
Sure.
Do I have to?
No.
Right.
No, you can do anything you want. That's the beautiful part of it. And the more you find something that is uniquely yours and intuitive and just happens to somewhat effortlessly, because that's a great segue into effortless. What is effortlessness? I think one of the most important things in a painting or a drawing, sculpture, whatever, is that the confidence is there in the stroke or the gesture or whatever it happens to be. If it's not confidently done, it's going to look like that. But the other thing is that it's really hard to do something confidently if you're not confident. So you have to act as if a lot of times. And I think that that's an essential part of making art, is take the risk and, get out on your skis and you might plant your head in the snow, so to speak, but if you don't get out on the edge of your skis, you're not going to be better. You're never going to know what that feeling is like to pull something off that you would never have imagined otherwise. So you have to be out in a way exposed to and being vulnerable to incidental things that happen in a sense accidentally, but they're happening intentionally because there's purpose behind it. And so it's being able to orchestrate what that happens to be on any given piece, that really kind of makes it strong, I think.
Mm-hmm. How did you decide to start painting portraits on glass?
So
they're 12-inch by 12-inch pieces of glass,
yes.
tempered glass, right?
Yes.
And then there are no backgrounds, and so the wall behind is painted whatever color he wants the background. So
yes. So there was an instructor at Art Center. His name is Peter Lyoshkov. He's still alive. A terrific, amazing fine art guy. I really have a ton of respect for him and his work. And actually had a studio at his house for a period of time. He was very influential. And then he got a little territorial when I started dabbling in painting on glass. And then I started looking into, who started painting on glass originally? Was there somebody else that, it's like, is it only Peter Lyoshkov? I mean, your world can be so small, depending upon, what you're looking at and who you're influenced by. But then come to find out, the Chinese, of course, were painting on glass. I mean, people have been painting on glass for centuries in different ways. I really loved the surface of glass as just a palette for glass, and to be able to clean it off and all that. But I loved the way it looked on the thing, and then seeing Peter's work inspired me as well. And so one thing after another, I wound up saying, okay, I want to do these portraits of people that I know, and then I want to move into portraits of people from different communities, of the uncelebrated as well as the celebrities of whatever town it happens to be, and do museum exhibit. And I wanted to work with, because of the glass, it's seductive, it's fragile, I love that it's breakable. I love how jewel-like it is. These are chamfered-edged pieces of glass of sapphire. They're a ½ inch thick, and so the paint sits on top of the surface, creates a shadow, which creates a figure-ground relationship, which I think is quite nice. And then, of course, it's reflective. And so when you're looking at the painting, as you're examining the painting, you start seeing yourself in the painting as well. And so
it's so much more than what it seems. I love this.
Yeah, so I really love that. And then, of course, thank you, Natalie. And then, of course, the other thing that I love about it is that in having the sort of opaque paint, I get to do all that luscious sort of paint stuff that I like to do with a juicy paint. The other thing that I could do is work with color theory. And so every exhibit is different, from warm to cool, light to dark, complementary colors as far as the backgrounds go. And so all the squares were painted initially on the wall of the museum. And so we'd pick those colors out digitally, and every time the person would be on a different color background, which also is interesting because if the painting's strong on the glass, you can put them on any color you want, and you might like one background color more than another, but it's not necessarily going to make or break the painting by whatever color background it is. And so consequently, with having done however many it is, like 15 or so museum exhibits, they've all been different backgrounds, and so each painting is on a different background depending upon the size of the museum. Some of the museums were smaller, so I didn't have that much work in it. But
what I love about this, though, too, is it's almost honoring of the people and how they change from a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis, and that every time they appear, they're slightly different.
Yeah.
Same person,
yeah.
But whatever's going on with them is changing. Right. I love that on that level.
And along that same line, too, Natalie, thank you, is that when it was really fun to have the community come to the exhibit, and they're part of an exhibit in a museum. And some of them had never even been to a museum before. And I was painting, anyone from the governor to the toll booth operator or the sign twirler or whatever in different towns. And, that celebration that they became a celebrity, and doing whatever job that they were doing, as when, of course, the governor, or, whatever athlete or whatever of the town was a celebrity already. But it was really fun to have everybody on the wall, from the community.
I think people that don't get to have that experience of like sitting for a portrait, you don't understand what it's like to be seen so completely.
That is well said.
When you sit for a portrait and then you see what other people see about you,
Yeah.
It's
intoxicating sitting for a portrait. If you haven't done it, do it. It's really fun to be the subject.
Yeah.
It is.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's so how did you pick the people from town to town? Did you just drive around and you're like, that's an interesting face, that's an interesting face, that's an interesting face?
I tried that at one point before I started this whole exhibit. I wanted to do these random people from New York. And don't try that, or maybe you can. I mean, maybe I wasn't charming enough, but man, I got turned down so many times that I thought I gotta. I mean, not so many times, every time. I never got a taker, and so
really?
No, and so I thought that was interesting.
They must be so jaded there.
Oh, I don't know. It was just going to be a quick photograph, but I wasn't going to asking them to come and sit. So anyway, the way that it happened with this is that I started at the Pasadena Museum here, and then and I knew a lot of people in Pasadena, so I asked different people from Pasadena, and then I thought, taking this on the road, it would be really fun to paint the community. How do I do that? And so I'd ask the museum, you choose the people, you choose the subjects, or put an all points bulletin out and just say, if you want to participate in this exhibit, you can, as well as get your celebrities, and within the people that aren't the celebrities, there are going to be other people that show up. And then invariably, they would have 15 or 20 that they would select. And then, like at Long Beach, it was I did 85 people. Because I was like, oh, you've got to be in the show, or the person that was working at the museum, and the curators, the installers, and a couple of people that worked in this restaurant. I mean, there were just so many wonderful people. You just go, come on, and if I photograph, my deal was, if I photograph you, you're going to be in the exhibit. I'm going to paint you, and so if you took the trouble of getting photographed, your painting's going to get painted. So that's kind of how I did that.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
So then you always paint from photographs, or you did mostly for that show?
I mostly painted for the population. I mostly did it from that because of just the practicalities of it, right? So in order to do 85 portraits for Long Beach, there's no way to have that many people come and sit and all that sort of stuff.
It's a big commitment.
And then you have an exhibit in Wichita. It's impossible. It's just
you'd have to take up residence there for a while.
And I don't think there's necessarily, especially the way I paint and why I paint and what makes my paintings interesting to me, is not so much someone sitting for me. I love doing that. That's wonderful. I love having a live person in front of me. But these paintings were more about experiment in that anyway. I wasn't as much concerned about the likeness, because the likeness is such an easy thing to capture. I was really more interested in the paint and how the paint sat on the surface, what the color was, what the whole body of work looked like on a wall. The person being in it, they're going to recognize it, and especially, they may not like it of themselves, but invariably the people that knew them would be, right, that's them. Yeah, that's them. But gosh, it's amazing how many people, I love the story of Gertrude Stein when Picasso had painted her. I think he painted her 3 or 4 times. And her first reaction was, that doesn't look a thing like me. And I think his response was something like, well, give it time, it will. There's another quote that I love too of Sargent. He said, every time I paint a portrait, I lose a friend. Yeah. Have you heard that?
It doesn't surprise me coming out of Sargent.
Yeah.
I'm laughing at this next comment because Clifton, who is a very engaged person on the group, says, this guy's extending me so much permission.
Good.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we need, right? I mean, why put barriers on yourself? Have the permission. You can have it.
Yeah.
Well, so we talked a little bit about limited time in terms of what you want to get done before you have to leave this place called Earth.
Yes.
What do you got? What do you want?
So I don't feel too much urgency as far as that goes. I feel very peaceful about that part of I'm going to keep making work, and I realize that I'm going to keep adding to the piles of the works on paper. That it's really easy to store the works on paper, and so the fact that I have close to I don't know how many it would be, maybe 1,000 pieces on paper, works on paper. That's not a problem because I have plenty of storage, and like I say, it's easy. You can put I think I can probably put about 125 or 30 pieces in each drawer. So that's easy. The canvases are a different story, and especially the ones now that I've been working on, I have wood panels behind them, and so because I want to be more aggressive with the paint, and I don't want to hit stretcher bars or whatever, and I use palm sanders and stuff like that after they get bone dry. So those are a little bit more challenging to store.
Do you have like space that rented out or something?
I did. I let my rental space go because I thought, I'm gonna keep these paintings nearby. I have storage over here, and then I have a collector who has probably, he probably has 600 or 800 pieces in Boston in crates for the museum exhibit. Those pieces are out there. And he's had those stored. God bless you, Jeff. I'm going to send this to you. I don't think that I forgot about those. He's actually moved them from room to room. He owns this beautiful building in downtown Boston, and eventually filled this. He had so much business. He's filled them all. He doesn't have room for my paintings in storage, so he moved into another building, and pretty soon he's going to fill that space.
This is a good person to have in your back pocket.
Oh my gosh, he's amazing. I don't know what I'd do without Jeff. Anyway, storage is an issue. So if that is an issue, you can either work smaller or work flatter. And I think what's wonderful about any given problem is a question properly defined is its own solution. And so if you form the question, if you're actually able to say, what is it that I'm doing or need to do or whatever, by defining what the problem is and really understanding the question, the answer is right on the tail end of it. So it might be that, I'm going to work small, or I like working large. How am I going to do that? And so, you roll the canvas, or you work flat and you stack the canvases or whatever. So whatever you need to do to get the work done, and stay practicing, put your time in. If you have a full-time job, your other discipline would be that you say, okay, well, I need to get X amount of hours in the week. How do I do that? Where are the windows? And then if you don't create the windows, it's not going to happen. And then what happens invariably is you look back on 10 years and have regret, and you don't ever want to have regret.
Yeah. You've been so gracious with your time. Really.
You've been great. Thanks.
So gracious and so lovely. And let's just see. Pam wants you to know that she's been painting landscapes on vintage windows.
Oh, nice.
How do you start a portrait is another question here. Okay, so let's go back to that. I do want to say that I am, and you've probably seen me on Facebook and or Instagram when you post like 4 little paintings and you start and you just see 4 different scenes of how it's progressed. I'm one of those people. I'm like, please put up more of these so I understand your process. So Kelly, I would tell you follow Ray. It's Ray Turner Population, I think.
Yes.
Ray Turner Population on Facebook and Instagram, and there are places where he does show his process. He's got 4 paintings up, and they're all progressive, and you see what he lays down first, and then how he makes it work. It's really interesting in how he deals with shadows. So if that's something that you struggle with, that is something definitely to
I want to
consider.
get one of these setups here. I've been thinking about the fact that I'm not teaching and feeling kind of guilty, to be quite honest. Over the last few years, I've been feeling guilty that I'm not back at least giving a day of teaching. And so what I'm thinking of doing is getting kind of an apparatus like this. I bought the little stick, the little thing that gets on the, you put it on the tripod. But I'm going to find out what this is, and I could just set it up over here, and I'm going to start maybe doing some videos and just applying paint. But to answer your question, I don't tend to draw at all anymore unless I just feel like drawing that day. I don't tend to do much pre-drawing or drawing out the painting or whatever. I tend to just, like I said before, I'll squeeze paint right onto the glass. I try to start differently every time, and so I might squeeze paint right onto the glass, or I might just scoop up a big pile of paint and throw it on, and then start working the shape into what looks like the person's head, and then just kind of fine tune it as I go, knowing that, you know, they're basically two simple shapes, what's light and what's in shadow, and I tend to have a very good reference for that. That's my main criteria, is that I have to have a really good image to work from, and then not so much detail, but just big simple shapes. And then I just experiment with all the different kinds of things that I want to, you know, whatever the painting. Here's another thing this is maybe nebulous or kind of too ambiguous or ambivalent maybe, or vague, but I try to get out of the way when I'm painting, and I find that it's when I do, a lot of interesting things can happen. And what that basically means is not having a certain sort of preconceived idea about what I need to do, or I don't let the photograph ever dictate to me what is going to happen with the painting. I have paintings that sometimes are of a person, but the painting's going in a direction. I'm like, okay, I'll just paint another painting. This painting's going too well in this direction for me to worry about whether it's looking enough like the guy.
Is this painting back here sort of like an example of that?
That Anselm Kiefer painting I did out of my head, and I love Anselm Kiefer's work. He's one of my main heroes. I think he's probably my main hero of a living artist today.
Show you where I'm referencing that.
Yeah. And so when I did Anselm Kiefer, I didn't want to look at any images of him. I kind of knew what he looked like in a way, and it didn't really matter. I just wanted to paint a portrait of, you know, that was Anselm Kiefer in a sense to me. And so I feel that way about several different of the portraits. I tend to do some of that just without looking at anything, because it's going to look enough like them for me. Mm-hmm. I want the painting to be interesting. So you guys are so lucky to have this, gal. I'm so happy to have visited with you, and thank you very much, Natalie.
Thank you
really
so
great.
much
My
for
pleasure.
being here. Thank you guys. Thanks for bearing with us and my technical difficulties, and just showing up and being here. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy to finally get to talk to you.
It's nice to have somebody out there like you doing this. It's terrific. So I appreciate it.
I'm excited. It makes me happy.
Good.
All right, you guys. Thank you for being here. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.